The original Doom from 1993 was one of the most revolutionary games of all time, we all know this by now, and less than a year later, Doom 2 Hell on Earth would be released. It too was very revolutionary. Both Doom 1 and 2 were very successful, and it was only a matter of time for Doom to get another sequel in the form of Doom 3, being released in 2004. Now, that might sound right to you, however, we're actually skipping over one game that was released all the way back in 1997, 4 years after the original. The game I'm referring to is Doom 64, a Doom game made specifically for the Nintendo 64. Now, for the longest time, I always just assumed Doom 64 was a remake of the original, simply ported to the N64. However, that's not the case. In fact, Doom 64 has more content than Doom 1 and 2 put together, mostly because it's basically Doom 1 and 2, but with different levels. Back in December, we took a look at the original Doom duology, and in that video, I briefly mentioned the fact that the original idea for that video was meant to be the original Doom trilogy, which was going to be Doom 1 and 2 with the addition of Doom 64. However, due to a few issues, I simply had to restrict it to only Doom 1 and 2. But, months later, I finally got my hands on a glorious Steam Deck, which means now recording Doom 64 won't be an issue at all. So, it's about time I kept my promise and take a look at Doom 64. Also, the day this video comes out will mark the release of the new Doom game, Doom the Dark Ages, so perfect timing, I guess. Something very interesting about Doom 64 is its drastically different tone, swapping the vibrant machinery of the UAC facility for a more dark and foreboding take on hell. This change is reflected even more with the soundtrack replacing Bobby Prince's iconic demon-slaying jams for Aubrey Hodges' droning ambience. Now, despite the tonal shift, it's still Doom at the end of the day, so it's bound to be good, right? I'm gonna be as blunt as possible and say I fucking hate this game with a burning passion. It's beyond terrible, but I guess I have to explain that, don't I? Well, enough stalling, let me explain. But before we begin, go on and hit that like and subscribe button, helps me out a lot. More do you think? It's free, it only takes 5 seconds to do, and share this video with everyone I can. My goal is to eventually hit 100k, so if you want to be part of that, you know what to do. With that all being said, I think it's about time to get into why Doom 64 is the rightfully forgotten black sheep of the Doom series.
Say to you while watching the expert actor Dread.
Now, before the video actually begins, there's a few things that have changed since last time I talked Doom, mainly the difficulty. Now, back in the Doom 1 and 2 video, I played on Hurt Me Plenty, the normal mode of Doom. However, for this video specifically, and only this video, I'm going to be playing on the hardest difficulty, Ultra Violence. However, it's not called Ultra Violence, it's called Watch Me Die for some reason. Now, the reason why I decided to play Doom 64 specifically on the hardest difficulty is because this game is a walk in the park for one main reason we're going to get into later. And the second thing is my aim. Now, in the original Doom 1 and 2 video, my aim was rather shit. However, you could definitely notice, or maybe not, I don't know, it's improved rather drastically. And that's because I recently got to try out Doom 2016 and Eternal, which forced me to get good in order to beat each respective game. Also, something specifically I want to mention about my coverage of the Doom series is I'm not going to be covering anything but mainline games released by id Software, so no Plutonia, Sigil, or Legacy of Rust. I know there's been other YouTubers who've talked about the Doom series who's also taken a look at those games as well, but I'm only interested in the mainline ones. Now that you have a little bit of context, why don't we get into Doom 64? Being first released on March 31st, 1997, Doom 64 was a Doom game made exclusively for the N64 developed by Midway Games under the supervision of id Software. Doom 64 takes a different approach to the Doom series with a far darker aesthetic. For the most part, Doom 64 plays similar to its predecessors Doom 1 and 2, except with a few differences. Mainly the enemy designs, which I'll get to in a few minutes. Doom 64 keeps the same basic gameplay principles as the other Dooms had, dropping you into a giant labyrinth where you have to find keycards, kill demons, and make it to the end portal. And to a certain extent, that's kind of where Doom 64 falters. It's just Doom 1 and 2, but with a different coat of paint. It plays identically. The reason why that's kind of a problem is because this is the third Doom game that follows the same formula. While Doom 1 and 2 were very good, especially for the limitations of the time, Doom 64 isn't very good for a few reasons. I made it very clear in the intro that I don't like this game. I have always kind of saw Doom 64 as a ripoff of the other Doom games. Hell, for the longest time I thought Doom 64 was just a remake of Doom on the N64. It's just kind of weird that Doom 64 is an exclusive for the N64, knowing, well, Nintendo. That, and because it's called Doom 64, most people just kind of assumed it was Doom on the N64, as a bunch of other N64 games that had N64 in the name were just other games but with 64. But no, this was a fully new Doom game, except the fact that it had all the same weapons and all the same enemies, just ignore that part. And because it was an N64 exclusive, in order to play it, you had to use this fucking infernal contraption. I don't know about you, but I think it's about time we actually look into the game itself, so let's do that. The opening to Doom 64 is actually pretty cool with this long shot circling around showing us the war between the Marines and demons. Eventually it ends and shows us that the map was actually the Doom logo. Now right off the bat you'll definitely notice something different compared to the other Dooms, and that's the demon redesigns. Oh boy. A lot of the enemies were fully redesigned from the Doom 1 and 2 counterparts. Some of the changes are good and some of them are fucking awful. Most of them range from decent to holy shit what were they thinking. For the most part they look identical to their previous designs with slight tweaks. However, some of them were completely redesigned and looked nothing like their previous incarnations. Mainly the Caco Demons and the Pain Elementals. The Caco Demons look like a more grungy version of its previous design with the addition of arms, which will be something that later Doom games also add for some strange reason. While definitely not the worst Caco Demon design, the lack of a red hue definitely throws it off a bit for me. I miss the big red meatballs. Then there's the Pain Elementals. What did they do to this poor thing? The Pain Elemental's design just looks very strange. I don't know how I feel about the mullet. It seems like the Caco Demon and the Pain Elemental kinda swapped palettes, with the Cacos being more beige and the Pain Elementals being more red. It's strange. Just very strange. Besides the redesigns of the demons, they act practically the same as they did in the other games, to the point where most of them even have the same amount of health they did in Doom 1 and 2, which doesn't seem like a big problem until you consider one thing, which I'll get to in a bit. Most of the enemies that were present in Doom 1 and 2 are also present in Doom 64 with a few strange exclusions, mainly the Archvile and Spider Mastermind. Not that I'm complaining, because who doesn't hate the fucking Archvile? Now, a few other enemies didn't return also, like the Revenant, Heavy Gunner, and Zombie Man. While zombies do appear in Doom 64, only the shotgun guys make their appearance. However, for some reason they didn't use the black and red design of Doom 1 and 2, but the white with green hair the normal zombies had in Doom 1 and 2. I don't know, it's a strange design choice. That's something they seem to do a lot, just basically swap the color palettes of enemies and call it a day. Now, there's actually one new enemy in the game, well, technically two, but one's a boss and one's just a normal enemy. The normal enemy they added can't really be considered a new enemy, but the game does, so whatever. It's the Nightmare Imp, which would later be renamed in Eternal to the Prowler. It's still basically the Nightmare Imp, so what was the point? The Nightmare Imps are just purple redesigns of the already existing imps with zero changes besides, well, being purple. Purple guy! Now, if that sounds a bit boring to you, it's because it is. Just swapping the colors of enemies and calling it new enemies just flat out boring. It seems like Midway was just taking ideas from the already successful IP Mortal Kombat with all these palette swaps. Now, the palette swaps aren't the only thing that are boring. The entire game is rather boring. A big part of that has to do with the music. In previous Doom games and even future Doom games, one of the most iconic parts is the rocking soundtrack, with Doom 1 and 2 being composed by Barry Prince, 2016 and Eternal being composed by Mick Gordon, and Tag 1 and 2 being composed by Andrew Holshow and David Levy. A common thing all these soundtracks have is that they kick ass. Killing demons to a rocking soundtrack is what makes Doom Doom. Take that away and it becomes kinda stale. Now, I'm not saying Doom 64's OST is bad, it's just not a good Doom soundtrack. Aubrey Hodges did a great job with the soundtrack and even composed the soundtrack for the PS1 port of Doom, which also went for a more ambient and droning approach, just like in Doom 64. It's not bad, it's just not what I want to hear when I play Doom. That's kind of a problem that Doom 64 has. You can't really play it like a classic Doom game, even ignoring the music or lack of there. One of the biggest problems that came with the limitations of the N64 was the amount of enemies that could be present on screen. In Doom 1 and 2, there was always an enemy on screen, in fact, quite a few enemies on screen. So it was quite easy to run and gun your way past each level, while also having enemies left over to, once again, gun down. That's just not something that happens in Doom 64. There's only a certain amount of enemies that can be present on screen at once. That's kind of a problem because Doom is all about shooting demons. This was a feature that I was referring to when I said Doom 64 was too easy. Because of the limitations on how many demons that could be present on screen at a certain time, it is impossible to get overwhelmed, which is one of the main factors in deciding whether or not a Doom game is hard or not. Well, of course there are other factors, being overwhelmed is still a big part. In Doom, Doom 1, 2, 2016, and Eternal, getting overwhelmed is almost always a death sentence. That's something that just doesn't happen in Doom 64, and by that extension, Doom 3, but we'll get to that when we eventually talk about Doom 3. Even if it had nothing to do with the difficulty, it still makes the levels feel more empty than they would be in other games. The way Doom 64 gets around this is by having demons just pop in after completing certain tasks. The problem with that is because they just pop in, it's not uncommon to encounter situations like this. Now, I know in the original and even the sequel, enemies just popped in. However, there was always an indication with a green flash that a demon was teleporting in. The only indication you get in Doom 64 is them fading in with a slight sound effect. They could have at least added a bit of particle effect like they did in the original. I don't know, it just kind of feels very tacky. What also feels weird about the lack of a particle effect on the teleporting is that it's not something due to the limitations of the N64. It's something that was consciously done. I know it's not due to the limitations because the size of these levels are massive. Most of them act like labyrinths, kind of like in Doom 2, but done a lot worse. I ragged on Doom 2 a lot for having maze-like level design, but oh my god, Doom 64 is way worse. Most of the time you'll be backtracking through areas you already went through just to find something small, like a hidden button. On top of that, a lot of the ways you solve the puzzles in Doom 64 are so unclear. You're never told what to do, which is fine. You were never told what to do in the original Doom 1 and 2, however that becomes a problem when you have to start doing things like clicking on random parts of the wall. Like in this level, atop this pedestal is the yellow key card. The yellow key card is required in order to beat the level. How do you think you get the yellow key card? Well, clearly you go on the side and click these buttons, and now there's a cage covering it. However, going back over here to click this button removes the cage, but puts it back on top of the pedestal. So, what do? Well, isn't it obvious? You go over to this random part of the wall and click it. And there you go, now you have the yellow key card. How are you supposed to figure that out? That brings me to another point on why Doom 64 is kind of trash. The puzzles. The puzzles are very terrible, either being very basic or just like the keycard one I just showed you being stupidly vague. Most of them are solved by just clicking buttons, which I know the original Doom 1 and 2 and the later games also had you just clicking buttons, but once again, this is the third Doom game in the same style as Doom 1 and 2. I'm tired of clicking buttons. I'm tired of running around pillars just to click buttons on said pillars. There's a reason why I wanted to talk about Doom 64 with the other Doom games. It's because it's practically the same game with a new coat of paint. Unlike the other games after Doom 64, which changed the gameplay drastically, it's very boring. Now, I'm going to be 100% clear and say Doom 64 is the only Doom game out of the entire series that I flat out don't like. Either my opinions are mixed or I flat out love it. I know a lot of people out there like Doom 64. In fact, someone very important to the Doom series really likes Doom 64, but I don't know, man. I just don't really like it. The levels just kind of suck, mainly because most of them are sprawling mazes and complex labyrinths, which is one of the main criticisms I had for Doom 2, which leads me to our next point, the maps. Can you fuck off with the pinkies? The original Doom 1 and 2 had some of those iconic levels in gaming history. Doom 64 doesn't really have any memorable levels at all. Most of them just kind of blur together. This time around, Doom 64 only has 28 levels, which is less than Doom 2's 30. However, they clock in at the same with 32 levels for each. Doom 2 has 2 secret levels, and Doom 64 has 4 of them. And the levels themselves are, once again, pretty forgettable. Now, I will admit, some of them are pretty good, especially compared to the city levels from Doom 2. Credit for the maps feeling more alive than in the previous 2 games. During a bunch of levels, they'll actually have a bunch of moving parts happening in front of you, which adds quite a bit to, once again, pretty forgettable levels. The moving parts are pretty interesting, like having keycards being built in front of you, or having giant smashes break the ground for you to progress, and even having levels shift around you. But that can only really do so much. Most of the levels just lack distinctness overall. Most of the levels look identical to each other and have the same setting, and said settings aren't very pleasing to look at, especially the beginning levels with the UAC facility. However, like Doom 1 and 2, you actually do get to go to Hell, and I will admit, I actually like how Hell looks in 64, especially compared to other games.
Peace.
I really like the contrast between the Hell infrastructure and the dark, gloomy purple skies. That's an easy way to impress me, with purple skies. I love purple skies, they look beautiful, especially when they're used in conjunction with hellish landscapes. I know that sounds very specific and only really catering to the Doom series, but I've seen a few series that actually have the same description with castles and dragons, but none of them really come to mind, so Whatever. I suck at remembering things, fuck off. But even with the awesome looking purple skies, the hell levels also feel bland somehow. I don't know, man, they just all feel the same. It doesn't help with the fact that most of the levels are not actually in hell. Like I mentioned, most of them are set in the UAC facility, which looks identical in every level. Don't get me wrong, there are cool settings in Doom 64, like the level Dark Citadel, where you go down in an underground library filled with zombies. Personally, I prefer mummies, but everyone seems to have preferences these days. The majority of the levels feel very samey, repeating the same things over and over again, kind of like the script. However, Doom 64 also has the addition of 7 levels with the Lost levels. Now, I will give credit, Doom 64's The Lost levels are far better than the base campaign, being far more engaging and well done than the base 28 campaign levels. They're not really anything notable besides the fact that they're better than the campaign. I just thought I'd mention it just in case you wanted to play Doom 64. But really, my main criticism of the Doom 64 levels is just how big and complex they are. They are far longer than the ones in Doom 1 and 2, not only because they're bigger, but because they have more complex puzzles to solve, and the puzzles themselves aren't very interesting. Most of them consist of you collecting keycards, and because the levels are so big, you have to do a lot of backtracking over parts of levels you've been over a dozen times. And because of the lack of demons, it becomes very boring, which is my main criticism of Doom 64 overall. It's boring. The levels are boring, the music is boring, the gameplay is boring. Play Doom 64 for long enough and you're gonna start enjoying the taste of fucking arsenic. It is reflected even more with the lack of new content. Doom 64 barely adds any new content. The only new things they really add is one new enemy, which is just a recolor of the imp, a new boss, and one new weapon. The new boss they added is the Mother Demon. The Mother Demon is very uninteresting, being another boss with the concept of shooting it until it dies like the Spider Mastermind and Cyber Demon were beforehand. Which, by the way, the Cyber Demon does make another appearance as a boss midway through the game, and you can probably guess he acts basically the same as he did in Doom 1 and 2. I know I bring up Doom 1 and 2 a lot, but can you really blame me? This game feels like a horrible ripoff of both Doom 1 and 2, with everything feeling way too similar. And may I remind you for the third time, this is the third game in the style of Doom 1 and 2, with little to no differences. It becomes very stale, very fast. The new content they added is not worth playing this game. The level design is subpar, so is the boss, and so is the new weapon, the Unmaker. The Unmaker is a very weird weapon, basically being a laser Gatling gun. Now, despite it being a laser Gatling gun, it's not very powerful, unless you upgrade it. Throughout Doom 64, around certain levels, after finding the Unmaker, you can find upgrades for the Unmaker, making it more powerful, and once it's fully upgraded, it becomes more powerful than the fucking BFG. This thing does so much damage when fully upgraded. It kills the final boss in seconds and shreds any demon unfortunate enough to cross its path. I don't know why this thing is so powerful or who thought it would be a good idea to make it more powerful than the BFG, but it's there if you want to use it. And I mean if you want to use it. Getting all 3 keys is kind of a pain in the ass, especially for what you're getting in exchange for collecting said keys. Oh well, you're collecting keys just to make the gun even more powerful, making the already easy game even more easier, and even more boring. Besides the Unmaker, the arsenal is the same as it was in Doom 2, which means yes, the SSG, or Super Shotgun, is back. And because all the enemies in the game have practically the same amount of health as they did in Doom 2, the Super Shotgun shreds every enemy in seconds, which once again makes the game far too easy, and because there'll be times where you have fucking 100 ammo for your shotgun, you'll never run out, making it even less challenging. The only enemy in the game besides the 2 boss enemies that can withstand the power of the Super Shotgun for some time is the Barons of Hell, which barely appear due to the Hell Knights. Yeah, that's something I kind of noticed about this game. It really loves its Hell Knights. They're fucking everywhere in this game. Almost every time you round the corner, open a door, there's a Hell Knight waiting for you. And in some cases, multiple Hell Knights. It's very strange the amount of Hell Knights that appear in Doom 64. While originally I thought it to be some of the developers' strange attachments to specifically the Hell Knights, now that I think about it, it's probably due to the limitations on how many demons can appear per level, which siphons back to what I was saying in my Doom 1 and 2 videos, where I said both Barons of Hell and Hell Knights are just beefier imps, so that's probably what they were doing. The developers, not the Hell Knights. I don't know what the fuck they're doing. While on the topics of Hell Knights, something weird happened with the Hell Knights. For a while, they just flat out replaced the Barons of Hell. In both Doom 3 and Eternal, Barons of Hell don't appear at all, only Hell Knights. Sure, in Doom Eternal, you do have Dread Knights, which shares the name with Hell Knights, which themselves are just flaming barons, so can you really call them classic Barons of Hell? But I digress. Well, on the bright side, at least Doom 64 doesn't include the Archvile, so that's a plus. Honestly, I think I'd rather prefer the Archvile. At least there's something challenging in this boring-ass game. Now, originally the video was meant to end here, but instead I decided to extend it a little longer to talk about a few things that I thought would be important after I already finished recording the script. I know this is going to feel a little bit sloppy, so let's get this done quick. Also, sorry if I sound like I'm dying, allergies are a bitch. I've already mentioned that the puzzles in Doom 64 are rather plain and basic, however, I feel like it's important to mention that a few of them are actually pretty good, but not in the way you may expect. A few puzzles in Doom 64 have you doing rather interesting things in order to complete them. When I was talking about the puzzles a few minutes ago, I was talking about how most of them never really told you what to do or had very stupid ways of completing them, like clicking on random parts of the wall. Some of the hidden puzzles in Doom 64 also do this, however, unlike the puzzles that are required to beat the level, these ones are actually rather smart and clever. One of the new puzzle types that they added in Doom 64 that I find very intuitive is shooting buttons. A good chunk of puzzles in Doom 64 have you shooting buttons in order to advance, either having it to actually progress in the level or just having it as a secret. Now, this feature may or may not have been an inspiration for John Romero in his own episodes, Sigil 1 and 2. A few puzzles are solved by shooting eyeballs, but probably not. One of the more interesting puzzles that Doom 64 has to offer is in the first level. Now, if you know anything about Doom 64, you probably know what I'm going to be talking about, and that's the barrel puzzle. The reason why I find the barrel puzzle specifically so interesting is because, to my knowledge, this is the only puzzle in the entire Doom series like it. Now, the reason why that's interesting to me is because barrels are kind of a staple of the Doom series. In every Doom game since the beginning, explosive barrels have always been used as an obstacle or as a way of doing extra damage to nearby demons. However, Doom 64 shakes it up by using them as a puzzle, which is very fascinating and very weird. No other Doom game has attempted anything similar to it, instead reverting to the simple collecting keycards and pressing buttons. Even shooting button puzzles haven't returned in the Doom series since Doom 64, besides Sigil, but once again we're not going to be talking about Sigil. There are 10 barrels scattered across the first level. Blowing them all up will open a door for a very short amount of time. Entering the door will lead you to a secret portal, and entering the portal will bring you to the secret level Heretic. Beating this level will give you early access to the lost levels, which is pretty neat if you don't want to go through all 28 levels, as I already mentioned, and not all that good. There's also a few other types of puzzles that Doom 64 has, like these pretty annoying teleporting puzzles. We have to wait for our key card to teleport and guess which totem it's on. These only appear a few times, but when they do, they're still very annoying. I've mentioned a few times in passing during this video that most of the enemies are practically the same as they were in Doom 1 and 2. However, not all of them are exactly how they were in Doom 1 and 2. If you want to know the main differences, I would recommend watching this video by Decino. Basically, during the video, he compares Doom 64's and Doom 2's enemies to see how much they differ. If that interests you at all, I'll make sure to leave a link in the description. But once again, they are practically the same with a few differences, like the zombie man's doing slightly more damage than they did in Doom 2, and the cyber demon being exactly the same as he was in Doom 1, except the fact that he's a little slower, due to Doom 64 running at 30 ticks per second, compared to Doom 1 and 2's 35 ticks per second. However, an enemy that is very different for a very weird reason is the Lost Souls. The Lost Souls are almost completely different than how they were in Doom 2, being upgraded in every way possible. In the original Doom video, I mentioned that I thought the Lost Souls weren't very annoying, but when I made that video, I hadn't really played Doom 64. I mean, I played it a few times, but I hadn't really sat down and beat it. But oh boy, they are so much worse in Doom 64. Not only has their charging speed been upgraded from 700 units per second to 1200, but the Lost Souls can attack every 3 ticks, making it so that they basically have no cooldown on when they can charge you, unless they're shot, and that's because Lost Souls are the only demons that have a 100% pain chance. Sure, they have less health overall, but that doesn't matter when they become literal mosquitoes, draining your health within seconds, and they appear quite frequently, especially in the last level. The Lost Souls are made even worse by the fact that pain elementals now shoot out 2 Lost Souls instead of 1 like they used to. Because the Lost Souls can attack about every 3 ticks, and Doom 64 runs at about 30 ticks per second. Every 3 ticks of that 30 ticks, a Lost Souls can attack you. So roughly 4 times per second, unless I don't understand how that works, then completely forget what I just said. But anyway, what I'm trying to get out is the Lost Souls are probably one of the most dangerous enemies that Doom 64 has to offer, as every other enemy can be easily dodged. Now, this is definitely the most annoying that Lost Souls are going to get in the entire Doom series. After Doom 64, they kind of become fodder demons or very slight annoyances. While talking about enemies, there's a few things I want to talk about that I kind of left out in the enemy section. Mainly a few levels that are enemy oriented. Map 9 of Doom 64 is called Even Simpler, a sequel to Doom 2's Dead Simple. Now, I find this map very intriguing, literally being a sequel to an already existing map from a previous Doom game. And when I mean a sequel, I mean a sequel. It's practically the same as it was in Doom 2, with this level being the introduction of both the Arachnotrons and Mancubus like they were in Doom 2. However, because the original was kind of easy this time around, a few more enemies have been thrown in the ring, mainly Cacos and Barons. The level layout is also, well, pretty simple, even more compared to the original. See what I did there? However, Even Simpler isn't the only level in Doom 64 revolving around fighting an endless amount of enemies. There's another level in Doom 64 that's kind of a sequel to another Doom 2 level called Tricks and Traps. If you remember from my Doom 1 and 2 video, I said that level was kind of trash. However, the pseudo-sequel to that level, Watch Your Step, is probably the best level that Doom 64 has. Watch Your Step is the midpoint of Doom 64's campaign, and it's also where you will meet the Cyber Demon, or if you're on Watch Me Die difficulty, 2 Cyber Demons. The level itself is not only complex in some ways, but also really fun and has a very interesting premise. It's one of those levels where you go around killing enemies until more enemies spawn. You kill that wave of enemies, and then you have to fight a boss at the end. The way it's executed is rather surprising to me due to, well, a few things, mostly level design, but this level is actually pretty well designed, not only having a great layout, but also having a really fun arena. The way this level works is upon stocking up on ammo given to you at the beginning, you have to go out and seek a certain amount of enemies to kill. Upon killing those enemies, new enemies will spawn at the beginning. Kill those enemies and even tougher enemies will spawn. Eventually killing enough waves of enemies will spawn a Cyber Demon, or once again 2 Cyber Demons. Despite the concept being very simple, I find it really fun. All Doom games just have great combat except one, but this level also allows you to appreciate the new designs that each weapon's got. Yep, that sure was a transition. Just like the enemies, the guns in Doom 64 also got a redesign. Some of them are good, and some of them look like dog water. Like the new enemies, they look similar to their previous designs, except with a few changes. I really like how the combat shotgun looks, except I never get to use it because, well, the SSG. I know I complain about the SSG a lot, but really, it's not that bad. On the chain gun, specifically, they replaced the muzzle flashes to be purple for some reason. Not that I'm complaining, once again, I like the color purple.
What if it was purple?
This is probably the best a plasma rifle has ever looked. They also changed the noise so you know it's not fucking air bleeding. I kind of like the way it looks more futuristic compared to all the other designs. Now, I do know this is one of the more decisive plasma rifle designs, but I think it looks pretty good. The rocket launcher also looks pretty good. Something interesting about the rocket launcher is that it looks more similar to its Doom Eternal counterpart than it does to any other, which is probably due to Hugo Martin's affinity for Doom 64. And then there's the BFG. Yeah, it looks like every other BFG that ever exists, except the one from Quake, but fuck you. I actually just remembered there's another weapon that got a redesign. It's pretty weird. The last weapon to get a redesign was the chainsaw, going from, well, a normal chainsaw to whatever the fuck this is, now having 2 blades. The Doom 64 chainsaw would also be referenced in Doom Eternal with the Doom Hunters, which is once again due to that bastard Hugo Martin. Before this video actually ends, let's talk about the story a little bit, because Doom 64 is where Doom kind of went in an interesting direction with its story. While in the original Doom 1 and 2 you did get a bit of story, however, a lot of it wasn't very important. All you needed to know was the demons were invading Mars, and they killed your pet rabbit, rip and tear their huge guts. This time around, however, the story is rather important, especially to future games. This is kind of where the Doom series really branched off into something much bigger. At the end of Doom 64, it's stated after killing the Mother Demon, the Doom guy decides to stay in Hell to make sure the demons never rise again. But in the Lost Levels, after killing the Mother Demon's sister, a powerful rift happens, sending Doom guy into the possessions of the Night Sentinels. After proving himself worthy, he is then put in the Divinity Machine by the Seraphim, giving him him endless speed and unmatched power, turning him from Doom Guy into the Doom Slayer, and then that's where Doom 2016 picks up. Now, it's very important to mention that the Lost Levels was created after Doom Eternal had already come out, so it's not something that was planned out, it was just something that was very loosely connected back to Doom 64. The Doom timeline is very interesting, even having multiple timelines, with Doom 3 not being canon, but being its own separate timeline. But that's where our journey for Doom 64 comes to an end. Also, just now I decided I wanted to add a tier list at the end of every Doom video, so here's the ranking for Doom 64. While I definitely saw a lot of potential with Doom 64, especially with the Lost Levels, I couldn't help but feel very disappointed when playing and then beating it. Sure, it's not the worst game I've ever played, far from it, but to me, this game will always be a blemish on one of the best game franchises ever. So we can only hope that the next game will be far better and won't be a complete, oh for fuck's sake! Good night, ladies and gentlemen.